Hello and welcome to Joy of Books with me, Miss Joy. Today's offering is Face by Benjamin Zephaniah. The children's fiction book was released in 1999 and contains 207 pages. Sharing his views on the book today is author and teacher TC.
Thank you, Miss Joy. Yeah, this is a really good book by British-Jamaican author Benjamin Zephaniah. It was actually a very topical subject when it was released back in 1999. The idea of joyriding had become something quite common in the news, and of course drugs gangs in the UK were becoming more and more common. Not as common as they probably are now in the UK, where we have the county lines dealers and so forth, but certainly it was known about in the late 90s. And on the topic of joyriding, I actually worked at a school in Birmingham where sadly 4 young boys did lose their lives in a joyriding incident. So I was really pleased that Benjamin Zephaniah handled the subject matter in a very calm, considered and mature manner. And the writing quality generally very good, especially for his audience, which I would put for this book at 12, 13, 14-year-olds. So in terms of the story itself, you've got this main character, Martin, a quite strong protagonist, and his gang of 3, Mark, Matthew and Natalie, his on-off kind of girlfriend. And Martin is the confident one, the leader of the pack, if you like, going into his final year at school. However, upon a visit to a nightclub one night, he has a drink and a dance, but on the way home, he is offered a ride by some older teenagers. And unfortunately, he gets into the car with his friend Mark, and the driver is high, and they get into an awful crash, which leads to the death of the person in the passenger seat, and it leads to the imprisonment of the driver eventually. The other issue here, though, is that the main character, Martin, suffers horrific injuries, specifically to his face, hence the novel's title. So it's all about the way that he overcomes this and copes with this ailment, if you like. He's very clear not to see it as a disability, but it's certainly the way that people view him differently, and the way people in society view somebody with facial disfigurement is very interesting. And again, quite ahead of its time in terms of books such as Wonder, of course, which is the very popular book from a couple of years ago. It has been treated by Zephaniah 20 odd years ago, so way ahead of his time in terms of the content of his writing. In terms of the writing, I'm quite happy as an English teacher. I like to see colons and semicolons peppering the pages, and they are evident in this wonderful book. I enjoyed it. Maybe as a male, I could kind of empathise with the young teenager. Well, not the young anymore for me, but I could empathise with perhaps how he was trying to deal with the way people were dealing with his disfigurement. For example, his friend Matthew, the kind of sensible one who chose not to go in the car on that fateful night, he wants to take Martin to Unity, this kind of church youth club, but Martin doesn't really find salvation, if you like, there. His other friend, Mark, he kind of goes and forms his own gang, and again, of course, gang culture, rife in many cultures, but certainly in this setting as well. It's set in London, by the way, and every postcode has its own gang or gangs, and that came across here as well. I felt that the way that they were described was good. You've got the trio of kind of Jamaican girls who were very, very nice characters, but again, the way that they look might be a little bit more intimidating if you didn't know them. And that's definitely the theme of this book, the idea of it being, don't judge a book by its cover, if you like. Even the cover itself is interesting. It's blank, save for the kind of hairline of the main character. So, you can see there's definitely a message there that Zephaniah is portraying. I like the way that the other characters are described as well. You had the parents. I did a review of another of Zephaniah's books where I was a little bit critical of the way that the main character, his attitude towards older characters and the police and parents and so forth, teachers as well. But credit where it's due, Zephaniah is very respectful to teachers, police and elders and parents throughout this novel. And I felt the book was better for it, I have to say. I would overlook certain aspects of it. I'm not sure why he chose three boys, all with first names beginning with an M, Martin, Matthew, and Mark. It's confusing. You have to get your head around it, and you're quite happy later on where Mark and Matthew kind of drift away, if you like, and you can get Martin's name very much in your head. There's another nice character who is Anthony, who's severely disfigured from life, and he obviously has a very different view towards Martin's fairly recent facial injuries, which is nice to deal with. Martin, towards the end, he gets involved in the gymnastics team and is actually the captain of the gymnastics team by the end. Not sure how that happened, because Martin's quite clear of his dislike for gymnastics towards the beginning of the story, but I'll overlook that in the interest of suspension of disbelief. It's interesting the way that the girlfriend as well, Natalie, the relationship between Martin and Natalie could have been handled a little bit better, I felt. It's clearly a budding romance, and they are kissing before the accident, and then afterwards there's obviously no kissing. Natalie achieves a little bit of success with these shampoo commercials and ends up going off with her attractive, handsome co-star. So I felt that could have been handled or gone into a bit more depth with that particular aspect of relationships, because I'd imagine that it's hard enough being dumped anyway, but to be dumped when you're disfigured in some way, it would have been nice to have gone into a little bit more detail with that. Although, to be fair, he does refuse to leave the house for a few days, so perhaps I'm being a little bit harsh there. But the message there is that the main character discovers who his true friends are, and certainly it's not Natalie, and not Mark either. People move on, whatever happens, whatever trials and tribulations in life. It's important to keep moving forward, and I think that's also the message of this book. And of course, the protagonist finds his salvation later on in the gymnastics competition for the school, although the result isn't quite what he wanted. There's a scene where they take a picture at the end, and he says a few words and a few barbed comments kind of aimed at his ex, Natalie. So that's quite interesting, that kind of bitterness, if you like, towards her, but it is understandable. Although I felt the book could have ended with maybe a stronger message than that, perhaps. But no doubt about it, it's a very, very good book. I would certainly recommend it to 12, 13, 14-year-olds. I would say that it's that sliding doors moment, isn't it? If Martin, the character, had his life again, would he go into that car? Of course he wouldn't. But reading this book might just get across that message that people do need to think about consequences of their actions and getting in with the wrong crowd and the repercussions that could have for them. But a good book, I would certainly recommend it. It's a good read. It's not too lengthy a read, and I would say that well worth a look.
Well, thank you very much for your review of this very interesting book, Tizzy. Face by Benjamin Zephaniah is available from all good book outlets. Thank you for joining me, and please remember to like and subscribe to Joy of Books.